The question is, can you build as quickly as you're demolishing? That's the big question. But let's leave it there for this Nigeria.
And turn very quickly again to the Nigerian News Direct, and it's still, about the shockwaves sent from our interview yesterday with the former Minister of Aviation and former Governor of Bauchi State. And this is it. My administration delayed petrol subsidy removal to allow Tinubu win election. That's ascribed to Buhari, but really was his former special assistant that was speaking. Says APC in right position to answer why subsidy persisted in his government. Points to other subsidies his government stopped. Well, the question is, why didn't, the savings reflect on the revenue of Nigeria? Those are the subsidies that were stopped. And, of course, ensure palliatives are successfully implemented, he tells new government and organized labor. And take a look at this one above the nameplate. It's interesting. EFCC arrests fake senator for alleged $5.7 million internet fraud. So it's possible to impersonate a legislator.
Lots of questions.
Lots of questions, Gary. Let's leave it there for News Direct.
Well, finally, New Telegraph has this big one. I delayed subsidy removal to allow you, APC, win elections. Buhari replies Tinubu. Says party would have lost if PIA was implemented before he left office. Commends FG's policies so far. So that gives you an insight into how decisions are made in government space. So it's beyond just what is right or what is wrong. There are other considerations, but then you wonder how then do they place a value on these, these factors, as it were. Which one weighs more, re-election or doing the right thing, as it were? But hey, pages 2 and 3, Mr. Garba Shehu leads, or at least a statement from him, leads New Telegraph newspaper this morning. And finally, don't stigmatize drug victims, Tinubu warns. Drug addiction, not death sentence, as Mawa calls for collaborative efforts in fight against illicit drugs. I saw the Labour Party presidential candidate also tweeting about, drugs and all. We know for sure how much a challenge, drug abuse and the rest is for us as a nation. A couple of more stories for you on the front page of New Telegraph, but hey, let's leave you there for the dailies. And we'll take a quick break. When we return, we'll start with the major issues of the day. That statement by Mr. Garba Shehu, what it means to you, especially now that you have to go buy petrol at the filling stations. What should have been done? What should be done right now? All of those issues we'll take on in a moment, so please stay with us.
And everything about the subsidy regime, and then the scam in the subsidy regime was discovered by my committee. And of course, since then, recommendations were made. About the subsidy regime, and then the scam in the subsidy regime was discovered by my committee. And of course, since then, recommendations were made, which unfortunately were never implemented. And it's very sad. I'm sad to let Nigerians know that from what I saw, we came across situations where subsidy was claimed on pipelines that never existed. You just claim that I would have pumped X amount of, either finished products or crude, maybe from Kaduna, from Warri to Kaduna. Those that pump and those that are in the subsidy scam, they just fill papers, invoices, and they claim subsidy on it. In fact, there was an instance of a pipeline that was supposed to exist between Lagos and Warri. And tons of monies were collected on subsidy on a pipeline that never existed. This is Nigeria for you.
But I thought they were telling us that it is marketers and some other persons who are perpetrating the fraud. So NNPC is involved.
They are all involved in these things, all of them. Oh. All of them. And I must sadly also report that, you see, Nigeria subsidy, if it's that part of it that is actually goes for the subsidy, we go on subsidizing sub-Saharan Africa and Central Africa.
Conversation we had yesterday with the former governor of Bauchi State, who also happened to have chaired that subcommittee of the presidential task force to end or for subsidy removal. But he mentioned the name there in a member of that committee as well, who happens to be joining us today, Mr. Peter Isele. He's the former president of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, and he joins us virtually. Mr. Isele, thank you for joining us. I think you are muted. Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Isele? Can you hear us now?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good, fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. Mr. Isele, I'm sure you've been keeping tabs on the conversation around fuel subsidy, but yesterday it came to a head when we had the chairman of that committee that you were part of tell us that a lot of things were discovered and no action was taken owing to lack of political will. What's your stand on this?
I think there was nothing new that the chairman said yesterday. It's something we all know. This has been happening over the years. And then when we talk about the issue of scam around subsidy, everybody knows there's always been scam around subsidy. And if I'm even to tell you now what's playing out, this administration has been on for almost a month. Almost a month now, we still don't have an accurate figure of how many liters we consume every day. So if somebody tells you that there is fraud around it, yes, there is huge one that was discovered and recommendations was made to government, and the government did nothing about it. You even heard, when I actually watched that program yesterday, and there was a point where the former chairman, former governor of Bauchi alluded to the fact that somebody telling the president that he's making too much money, that subsidy should go. If you have a political will, that in itself, that person should have been arrested to tell the president how he's making the money. If the money is legal or illegal, then the person have to make a refund. One of the biggest problems we've always had is the issue of enforcement of our laws. So once people have no respect for the laws, so they can do whatever they want.
So let's step back a little bit, because there are those who have wondered, when we keep saying that subsidy is a scam, subsidy is a scam. Let's break it down. What was the plan behind the subsidy, and how was it that it turned into a scam at the end of the day?
Now, the plan behind the subsidy is, let me just break it down. Let's take, for example, the landing cost of your product, and is 100 naira. And then you add the various profit margins, and then finally it's supposed to sell at about 121 naira. Then at the pump price now goes for 70 naira. So the difference between your landing cost and various margins that are added, which push it up to 120, and you are not selling at 70 naira, so the subsidy is the 50 naira. So if you say we are consuming about 90 million liters a day, so you multiply the 50 naira times 90 million liters. So that becomes the subsidy that the government will pay to whoever is bringing the product into the country. So that is where the subsidy comes in.
Okay.
So now, where are the likely areas of fraud that we also discovered then is, first, you don't even know the quantity of product that you consume on a daily basis. Somebody tells you that we're consuming 90 million. And then you actually know that, I think it was earlier this year or sometime last year, where NNPC and Custom had a disagreement. While NNPC was talking about 90 million, Custom said, no, it should be about 60 million liters. And that now becomes its own challenge. So what we have there is Was there any audit carried out to actually let us know how much we are consuming, how many liters we are consuming daily? So a lot of these and many more recommendations were made to the government. You also look at the issue of the refineries. I know sometimes somebody's going to say, oh, labor unions were the ones that fought against refinery privatization. I'll say, no, that's not true. Now, what did we do? I had two former presidents before I became president of Pengasson. And what we did was recommend the NLNG model, which is 51-49, whereby the core operator has a substantial share, and then a private sector will run the refineries. We had several of our National Executive Council meetings where other members were so pissed with members of Pengasson from NNPC and said, we are tired of having this conversation in our National Executive Council meeting. Come with a recommendation before the next Executive Council meeting. And they came up with this recommendation and said they think the best way the refineries could work is partial privatization, whereby the core operator would now be the one to manage it. And then the NLNG model. Everybody knows that NLNG right now contribute billions of dollars to the federal government annually as dividend payment. So our problem has always been systemic, our problem has always been structural, and our problem is also been lack of value. We don't. What do we stand for? What kind of country do we want to have? So until we're able to answer that, this scam will continue in different directions.
So if I could just come in there, you're talking about the model, the 51-49 model, the NLNG model that was recommended, and I think that was recommended also in that report, if I get you correctly. How is it then that if we go by this analogy or this or your submission now, then practically everybody that was in government from the time that report was submitted till now would have questions to answer, and even those in the petroleum industry, like the NNPC as well. So how is it that nobody has been brought to book?
If you say what's in government, earlier this morning you were talking about Lagos-Ibadan Express Road. That is what is in government. You take 8 years to construct an express road, or more than 8 years. That's what's in government. You start wondering if I'm not questioning their Nigerianness, but you start wondering, how can we do this? How will you explain that since 1999, your refineries can't work? How do you explain that? Now, I'll give you an example. How do you explain that? It's something you cannot stomach. You can't. It's shocking that why will your refineries not work? The workers there, what would they be doing? They want to work, but what you have is that there are people making a kill out of it, and then we continue to import this product. I'll give you an example. The price of crude fell to $40. I as president of TUC, fell to $40. And I went to the then minister and I said, Minister, this is the opportunity to deregulate and let everybody get out of this subsidy conversation. Let's just end it now. And the minister told me, why? I said, at $40, this is the price this is going to be the price at the gas station. So what you will do instantly is that the price is going to drop. And for the price to peak again, it's going to take about 6-7 months. So by then, Nigerians will get used to the fluctuation of these prices. And once Nigerians are knowing that, okay, when the prices drop, we are paying less. And you know what the minister told me? The minister told me, no, we are not going to do it. It's an opportunity for government to save money. I said, what are you saying that? So then I went to Governor Shomole, I went to him, then Governor Shomole of Edo State. And I said, this is the opportunity. Because he too, as governor, he has also seen a lot of things playing out in that sector. And I said, this is it. So Shomole left Edo, went straight to the villa, had a meeting with the president, and said, this is the time to do it. And the president now set up a committee. The committee was headed by then late Rewanu Lukman. And then before we know what is happening, the government did nothing at the committee level. And I said, the prices are going to spike. And then when the prices started increasing, the government have one thing. There's one thing Nigerian government does very well. Once they start losing revenue, is that they devalue the currency. So it's later, 90 days later, government devalued the currency. Then they now called me and said, oh, we want to bring down the price now. I said, it's too late. If you bring down the price, you are going to have fuel scarcity and you're going to have queues, because the marketers have already importing products into the country based on that old price. So once we devalue, they will not bring in new product. And then we had scarcity. So one of the things that you have, one of the challenges we face is that government has no policy trust for that sector. So what they have is ad hoc measures. So if you have a plan for a particular sector, you follow it to the letter. And government also lack discipline, forward-thinking approach to envisage the challenges that will come.
Well, certainly the challenges that are coming right now are facing us headlong because in addition to subsidy removal, and we know that prices are going to fluctuate, we now have the flotation of the naira. Some people say it's devaluation of the naira. I mean, you decide what it is that you cling to this time around. But what we do know is that the naira against the dollar has now gone up. You need more naira to buy just $1. So I'm looking at the effect on ordinary people, and now ordinary people are asking, okay, if they say this thing was a scam, at least we're buying it at 130, as the case might be, 180, 190, as the case might be. We didn't buy it for more than 200 naira unless there was scarcity. And that was the experience of the ordinary man. Now we're buying it at 500 plus, as the case is. Is it very difficult to catch these people, to punish these people and clean up the sector, remove the corruption in that sector? How widespread or how deep was the corruption in your own estimation, and what would it have cost to say that government wanted to fight this corruption headlong?
I don't think it's difficult. First, you have to look at the issue of the political will to do it. That's why I talked earlier about enforcement of our laws. It's a whole chain. Somebody brings in the product, the person has his own. Then when you look at what we also discover, maybe between 2 to 3 million liters of PMS goes across the border every day. Are there no custom officers there? So they too also become part of the scam. Because for you to have that get through the border, the custom must allow that. Because you are not using keke napep to move petroleum product across the border. Each tanker you use, the lowest is about 33,000 liters. So if it's keke napep, you can say, okay, fine. Or motorcycle, you say, okay, fine. We didn't know where they hit the petrol. So you have that. And then you also have the marketers. You also have those who are bringing in the product, those who are clearing it. So it's a whole chain. And I think what happened was that government also abdicated its responsibility, because it's not the fault of the ordinary man that somebody is stealing petrol. So if people are stealing petrol, if people are manipulating the price, or people are scamming your citizens, your responsibility as government is to bring those who are responsible to book. If at the end of the day, nobody is arrested, nobody is brought to book, so what you have is that your citizens are now at the mercy of the shark. Because I also watched the former president or the president of African Development Bank saying that, talking about the scam, and also saying subsidy was there to subsidize the rich. The way the country is right now, the rich will survive. If you have 2 cars, you start using one. They will always find a way. The middle class will also find a way to survive. The ordinary man, the poor man, virtually has nowhere to go. You just talked about, I heard your talking about egg is now 2005. There are places in Lagos, it's 3,000. So now you need to ask yourself, if we want to develop as a country, we must have what I call a composite thought to our economic planning. It's not to say you want to kill one particular group in the economy and then allow the other one to survive. No, economy is driven by the middle class. The middle class are the people that have disposable income. Whether you talk about hotels, you talk about going to shopping malls, you talk about living the middle way of life. It's not the wealthy that actually drives the economy. It's the middle class. Ability for people to move from point A to point B. And that is lacking right now. And then the former President Buhari's administration, when you pass the PIA, automatically subsidy was gone when PIA became a law in the country. What did we do? Or what did the government do? The government knew subsidy was going to go. Did they make any plan to say, okay, when this effect comes, this is how we are going to mitigate it? That too also shows lack of forward thinking, or what I would say, lack of critical analysis before you make your move.
These are some of the big questions. I mean, in terms of, because right now people are wondering what exactly is the plan for us? I mean, yes, it's all well and good. We've described the way subsidy was operated as a tumor. It has to go. It, was cancerous to the Nigerian economy, etc., etc. But what exactly is the plan to ensure that the patient, survives after the surgery is done? That's a big question, and that is now making them ask the questions as to the people who actually cause all of these pains. Do you think that government has shown sufficient drive in the regard? I know that as you've described, the chain is long, it's widespread, but some people will say at least there needs to be scapegoats, and people will not know who will get caught in the scapegoat net, whereby yes. There are so many people who perpetrated this thing and everybody was doing it. But as you said, if the messaging is not right, doesn't it encourage many more people to, misuse subsidy, which will be applied in many other sectors? It could be in agriculture. It could be in many other places. Have you seen this drive on the part of government to say, we need to bring people who made life difficult for ordinary people under the subsidy regime to book?
Now, if you talk about the current administration, my hope is that it continues on its trajectory. You are talking about subsidy for petrol, and I'm going to tell you, the day they open up the CBN, that for agriculture is going to be worse. It's everywhere. That of agriculture is going to be worse because there's no system in place to how do you even obtain this loan. Because if we talk about the NNPC, if you talk about the petroleum subsidy, you go to agriculture, and that's why you heard me talk about it's systemic. Our challenge is systemic. And when you look at the former administration, they also lack that ability to say, okay, fine, there's nothing wrong with admitting, oh, we've made a mistake. And one of the ways you admit or you look at the errors you've made is to carry out an audit. I would advise you go and read the Accountant General of the Federation's audit report of the various ministries and government agencies. If it was in the private sector, none of those MDs or DGs in those ministries or government agencies will hold that office. Not anymore. Check the Auditor General's report. You check even the last report by the National Assembly, and you still wonder, why would these people still be holding those offices? So if somebody knows that, oh, because I know who is the president, I know who is the minister, and that's one of the challenges that we face. Where are you from? Where are you from? Are you a Northerner or are you a Southerner? What religion do you belong to? What is your ethnic base? So those are fulcrum of how decisions are made or how people are appointed. So when you have that as the base, you are never going to get quality people. So somebody who knows that the only way I can sustain or I can keep my job is to say whatever the president wants to hear or to say whatever the minister wants to hear. And whatever order the minister gives to me, I'll carry it out. Can you imagine a civil servant or a head of civil service investigating a minister in Nigeria? That's what happened in the administration of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was investigated by somebody in the civil service of the United Kingdom and indicted him. And that also led to his resignation. So even DG's here, that can't happen here. So what we also need to ask ourselves is, now subsidy is taken away, because I know government, everyone became frustrated about the subsidy payment, and government is broke. They actually don't have money. So when they don't have money, the only thing they had to do was to say, okay, this subsidy needs to go. Now the subsidy is gone, fine. So what is the next thing? How do you keep the people, or as you just said, keep the patient alive to see a better tomorrow? Right. Yes, I'm optimistic that there will be a better tomorrow, but the short-term fix to give hope is what is needed now. And what would I have suggested if I'm in their shoes? First, the last administration knew this was going to happen. You invest in gas. We have Innocent, for example. You just give them 2 years. Say, I want you to retool or reconfigure your plant, and then do something about going ahead to ensure that you make buses available. The first thing right now is to make public transport cheaper. And you make those buses available, and gas is cheaper, gas is cleaner. So you have 2 years to plan for what you are doing now. And then you go ahead and say a place like Lagos, and you say this is how much those buses that is coming from federal government or coming from the state government must carry a particular passenger. And then you also give the drivers incentive. If you run these buses for a particular number of years, you pay 10% of it. You pay 10%, and after 4 years, it becomes your vehicle. Because what you are trying to do now is that you may recoup 50% of it, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, you make it easier for the patient to stay alive.
So let me come in now, Mr. Sele. I mean, one of those recommendations been put on the table, quite all right. You're looking forward, but a lot of things have happened in the past, and it would seem as though we're trying to move on quickly from decades of mismanagement, of corruption, scam, just outright rascality, it would seem, in that sector. Just move on and then just face the future. But what about reparation for all of those things that were done in the past? I was reading a former finance minister, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's book about how they had removed subsidy. They phased it out in 2004. Oil prices went up. They had to return it in 2006. There was a lot of protest from labor, naturally. And then we just went back into it. And I just imagine if we had actually stayed, at that point where we removed subsidy, 2004, and just moved on from there. I just imagine what kind of nation finance it would have had if we had good managers. But subsequently, we've had at least 3 presidents. We've had ministers of finance, ministers of petroleum, particularly now. We've had different management of NNPC. We've had committees at the National Assembly, essentially people who are given the responsibility to manage the nation's resources well. And what we're saying is that for those stretch of years, they participated in this scam. That's what we're saying. So we need to actually talk about getting the right consequences for those years of mismanagement. And I'd like you to speak to it, because you're still a member of the APC, if I'm correct. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So your party has been in charge for now more than 8 years, had the opportunity to sort this scam out. And this is where we are right now. So is your party going to be taking responsibility for at least those 8 years of perpetrating or being a part of that scam?
They have to take responsibility, because the last 8 years, you would not say the party wasn't part of that. The party was who was elected. It was the APC that was elected. So the party has to take responsibility for that. And again, my hope is that the current president will also be able to clean it up. The party also have an opportunity now to clean things up, because there are a lot of errors that were made in the past 8 years. First of all, the former president, I would say, basically had no clue. I'm sorry to use that word, about what was happening. I'll give another example. I was invited by the transition committee, and they asked me, what do I think should be done? That was way back in 2015. And I went to the committee and I said, this president had what I call a very huge political capital. The huge political capital he can deploy. And then because of that capital, and then he also had, the government also has what you call a honeymoon period. And the honeymoon period gives you opportunity to do the heavy lifting. So I said, this president can do the heavy lifting. And the heavy lifting then also, I even went beyond the oil and gas, and I talked about the Nigerian Ports Authority. I don't see any reason why you cannot clear whatever is coming into this country in 14 days. And I also talked about NIMASA. There are other agencies, and they said, okay, fine. And then to look at it, nothing happened. Then later I met Ayatollah, who was also one of the chairman of that committee, and I said, what happened? He said they just didn't have the political will to implement it. And then you go to the next step, the 3 windows that they had. I told them they have only 3 windows. Then when they moved from 97 to 145, they also reached out to me and said, okay, what is your take now? This is the state of the financial state of the economy or of the government. I said, this is the final window, because election is approaching. If you don't do it now, you may never do it again. And then the next thing is that they went public to say, okay, subsidy is off, without doing the work. So one of the challenges that the political parties, not just APC, from 1999 has faced, is that they put square pegs in round holes. So when you do that, nobody comes to tell you, okay, this is the direction. It's not just APC. We had Obasanjo from 1999 to 2007. The same thing we are talking about now also played out. Then we had Yaradua Jonathan. The same thing we are talking about also played out. So it is our hope now that you have President Bola Tinubu, that may also look different.
Right.
He has started very well, and I was telling somebody, I said, if he does not make his move within the first 30 days, he will be sucked into the system. And how is this done? First thing is that the president comes on. The president relatives will go ahead and swoop around all the ministry, looking for the eggheads, looking for how to get in. And then the various civil servants will now look at, okay, where's the weakest point? And from the weak point, they start coming in, and then all manner of information start getting to the president. But the difference here now is that this president gives you a feeling that he knows what he wants to do.
Well, Mr. Sele, at that point, I'd like to come in, pardon me, because of time, so we can accommodate some of these major issues. Again, I'd like us to hit the nail on the head so that we can leave this conversation with action points for government, so that we know that at least this government, yes, has work to do, but can also make reparations, I keep saying that, using that word, for things that have happened in the past. I don't know if people are afraid to mention names, because obviously people have fed fat, are probably still feeding fat from this country. And as you said, the rich will always survive, but maybe not for the poor, multidimensionally poor Nigerians, over 100 million. So at least for the sake of those Nigerians, maybe we can begin to hit the nail on the head. As far back as 2006, subsidy payment at the prevailing exchange rate was $2 billion. The World Bank was saying recently that if we were to continue with subsidy payments, we're going to run into, what, trillions of naira, money that we don't even have. And clearly that money will be going into the pockets of people, as has been happening for decades now. So people have literally become billionaires as a result of this scam. So why are people, even government, afraid to mention the names, put out those names, probe those people appropriately, and get justice for the over 100 million Nigerians who are poor, who have been at the receiving end of this? Why?
It's very clear, lack of political will. And whether you also like it or not, some of these players are also part of the government. You can't, take for example, you can't steal. I can come to channels now and move your camera without somebody inside channels allowing me to do that. First, there must be the security man at the gate that will be compromised, who will allow me to get in, and then before I get to your studio, I move the camera. So first of all, people in government are also part of it. And then we also have those people who are also marketers or whatever. That's also why I also talk about campaign finance reform. If somebody comes to you now, he's stealing our subsidy money, and then the next thing, the person is giving you 1 billion naira for your campaign, how are you going to move against that person? So those are some of the issues that we have to look at. But the fact is they lack political will, and I would say go ahead, audit the subsidy payment over the years. I will support the president if he wants to do that. Audit the CBN, because CBN is also part of it. So the whole scam is that somebody needs to pay for it. I concur with what you said about the issue of reparation. Because if there are no consequences, it will continue, not just in the petroleum sector. It will continue at the port, it will continue in the agriculture, it will continue at CBN, it will continue at Nimasa, it will continue at all the various MDGs.
Mr. Esela, if I may come in there, it may seem like, we can't talk enough about reparation and a demand for accountability of those involved. I'm glad you watched the interview yesterday, and Mr. Yuguda made bold to even say that the NNPC was involved. You can't rule out the participation of the NNPC in this fraud. So can we begin to say that, if we're demanding accountability and ensuring that those who have been involved are brought to book, that we should begin to look at the administration of that corporation, especially, in the past 8 years of the Buhari administration, and demand that the group managing directors up until this current group CEO of the corporation be made to answer questions about this so-called scam. Because Mr. Yuguda said that subsidies are even paid for pipelines that do not exist.
Yes. It has to start from NNPC, because NNPC is the one bringing in the product. It will start from NNPC. How do you even think about it? The current GMD was the first GMD of NNPC to show us an audit report in over 30 years. Who runs a company without an audit report? So the NNPC have been running without audit report for over 30 years. The current GMD was also the first one to let us know that this is how much the moribund Kaduna refinery, where nothing is happening, this is how much is costing the country to maintain. For me, I saw that as an opportunity for government to make their move. Rather, I would say the glass is half full rather than half empty. Because first thing was, okay, this is the problem and the challenges facing us in NNPC. So what do we do about it? So he starts from the NNPC. Then you go to the marketers. And then you also now have to go to formerly a DPRO that they now called, that has a new name now. And then they're all part of it, custom. There are documents that you can go with all of these to say, okay, fine, who are those behind this? And then you take 1, 2, 3, or 4. You can't bring everybody to book in all of that, but you must take the kingpins, those major players who, either by corruption or by dereliction of duty, may have caused the fortune, may have caused the government or the country to lose so much money. You say people are not mentioning names. Yes, one of the reasons why you have people not mentioning names on TV is also nobody wants to be liable. You may not even like somebody coming here to mention names. But the key here now is there are several reports before government that government can act on.
Mr. Sele, it's also curious that the former Minister of Aviation and former Governor of Bauchi State is coming out to say this now. I mean, he's a chairman, board of trustees of the APC Professionals Forum. So he's been a member of the APC for a very long time. So the question is, why, if members of the political ruling party are in full acknowledgement of subsidy being a scam in the past 8 years, why didn't they lead the advocacy, vociferously that subsidy had to go? Some would ask, is he trying to curry favor from the current president?
I may not want to say that. I may not want to interpret it that way. But one thing is very clear. But don't also forget he was a former governor. So Nigeria is one place that I found from all my exposures and my travels and reading of various political systems across the world. Nigeria is the only place where you see a governor complain. A governor will complain. A president will complain. A commissioner, if you say commissioner for works, he will complain. The reason why you are paid is to find solution to the problem. So a governor is not supposed to complain. And if you go back to even the governors forum, I will go back to when I said we really had a very active governors forum. The last governors forum, if I'm to rate them, I would say this is one of the worst governors forum we had in the last 8 years, in the sense that they were not asking critical questions. Commissioners for finance will go to Abuja, and there's no money for the federation to share. And they said all the money has gone to subsidy. Nobody was asking for accountability. Governors were not asking for accountability. No committee was set up to say, okay, how is this? How is it that there's no money in the federation account? I watched the GMB said NNPC made profit that runs into trillions in one of TV stations. Somebody sent it to me. And I said, if NNPC can make such over 3 trillions as profit or revenue, then how did that just happen when they suddenly just became a limited liability company? So these are questions that we expect governors or critical stakeholders to ask. You see, nobody's trying.
So, Mr. Sele, why the groundswell of support from governors now under this current administration for the removal of subsidy and the call for Nigerians to support the current president?
Because governors need more money. They need more money. And when governors are broke, they're also looking for more money. But what is also lacking in
They didn't need money in the past?
Yes. You see, the difference now is every day with devaluation, every day the revenue they are getting is shrinking by the day. Governors will tell you that since the beginning of this year, NNPC will say there's no money to share because the whole money has gone into subsidy. So governors want the subsidy to go out. And there's something I also want to bring to the attention of Nigerians. Our attention is always on the federal government. Provision of water is the responsibility of the state government. State and local government, we don't put attention on what they are doing with the money coming in. You just made mention of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. I'll take you back. When Ngozi was Minister for Finance, what she was doing was that she was giving us monthly publication of allocation to each state. The governors fought her to a standstill that after about 6 months or so, she had to stop. Because the governors did not want the people to know the amount of money coming to their state as allocation.
So, Mr. Sele, this political will that the past administrations lacked to bring perpetrators to book and to end subsidy, does this current administration have it now to ensure that, those who have stolen the nation's commonwealth are brought to book?
I think so far they are making all the right moves. So far they are making all the right moves. And I would say I'll give the current president a benefit of a doubt. That, okay, fine, he has done the heavy lifting. I expect you do heavy lifting in your honeymoon period. And your honeymoon period does not go beyond 100 days. So my worry now is that he has to quickly start putting in place stopgap actions to ensure that the patient, as more alluded to, the patient is not dead before the progress start coming to fall?
Well, man, that analogy gets me every time. But, this patient naturally should not be powerless. It should not be at the mercy of these people. In fact, this patient put those people in charge to ensure that he or she, as the case may be, flourishes. The labor movement has been vehemently against subsidy removal time and again, saying that this is not clearly the way, this is what the average Nigerian gets from government, and you want to take it away. So labor clearly has also been a part of keeping that scam ongoing, you would say, because from time immemorial, as they will say, labor has always been against subsidy removal. 2004, eventually came back 2006, then the Jonathan administration 2012. Yes, this current government was also in partnership with labor against it. So why is labor always in support of that scam, if I can just ask that?
Okay, let me just, I hope I have enough time to give you an analogy of what also happened. The first town hall meeting that was held under President Jonathan in Lagos, Labour was also behind the design of those town hall meetings. Labour was part of it to say, okay, let's have 6 town hall meetings in the 6 geopolitical zone, so that Nigerians will be aware. Because what Labour wanted was also to carry Nigerians along. So at the end of the day, we only had one. And I also had an interface with the president. And the president said, suddenly we woke up one morning and they said subsidy is gone. And I met the president. President, this wasn't what was discussed. Why don't we do the 6 geopolitical zone? And the president said he has a report that every Nigerians have already accepted the fact that subsidy need to go. And the first thing I said, Mr. President, this is not going to fly. Because first, you have to get your timing right. For you to be able to make any decision that will be acceptable, you are not seeing anybody on the street now because the sitting president got his timing right. You can't just increase subsidy, take away subsidy when people are coming out of the Yuletide. It was just after Christmas and the pressure of finances. And that became his own albatross that cost him. I think that would have cost him his election because everybody was really upset after that. Labour actually is not against it. You may see that we have, what people don't know is that my constituency is Pengassan. Pengassan have always consistently said subsidy need to go, but fix the refineries. Is that asking for too much? Fix the refineries. That has been what President Shino Luwoye, President Brown, President U.M. Okoro, these are presidents before I became president. Now, we still went on to be talking about fixed refineries, and government didn't do it. So if you see the president of Nigerian Labour Congress, if you listen to Joe Ajero is still saying it, that we cannot have an import-based deregulation, whereby you still keep on bringing product. That was Labour's main area of discussion. But government just won't do the needful. So those are the challenges that policy making is responsibility of government, not responsibility of Labour.
Mr. Sele, this conversation is not a conversation that would end anytime soon. But at the end of the day, the question of consequence management still comes to mind. You talked about one of the biggest challenges we have in Nigeria. We've gone down this road, and now subsidy has been removed. But then there are still those who have wronged the nation and wronged the future of this nation. So in your closing thoughts, what would you say should be done, as some would say, low-hanging fruit that can be done now to ensure that those who will be stepping into this, now that it looks as if the market's been deregulated, what should be done to stop any other person from thinking to wrong this nation and the future?
Simply, whoever violates the law is made to face the consequences of his action. Once you do that, you are now sending a message to everybody to say, this is no longer government as usual. And that's why I said I'm giving benefit of a doubt to this current president and hoping that he will keep doing what is right for this country. At the moment, he's making all the right moves, and I hope the government can immediately move for the low-hanging fruit, because petrol in July and August is not going to be $4.92 as it is in Lagos, or 511 in Abuja. So Mogbe and Co. be ready for more price increase, but they need to put things in place to mitigate the effect of that.
Mr. Seller, just a quick one. I know my producers will not be happy about this, but hey, that report that your committee submitted, do you think it should be revisited? The names of those that were mentioned there, should they be prosecuted, or would you say it's time-bound?
Yes, it should be revisited. It should be revisited.
All right,
and even more audits carried out to ensure that whoever is behind it, they are all brought to book.
Thank you very much. Mr. Esele, Peter Esele is a former president of the TUC, and he joins us virtually for this conversation. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. Do stay with us. Well, whether for your home, for your business, whatever it is, energy is needed. And it doesn't look like energy costs are smiling right now, as they use that expression. So let's get into that all-important topic. We've talked about, petrol, which is another form of energy, but let's get into electricity. And as you may have seen there, we have two gentlemen joining us on the program this morning to get into this very thorny issue. Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadir is the Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. He joins us virtually from Lagos. And right next to him is Mr. Chukwuemeka, who's the MD CEO, Kensington Energy Limited, also joining us virtually from Lagos. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning.
Thank you. I know there's been a lot of talk about this. Yesterday, it looked like there was some conflicting report from one of the distribution companies. But let me begin with Mr. Ajayi-Kadir. This proposed electricity tariff hike from July, it looks like there's been some conflicting report. Can you give us an update, really? What do you know about this proposed tariff hike?
Okay, I think it came
to us as a surprise because we didn't expect at this time. But what happened was that some of our members started receiving notices from the discos in Abuja, I think also in Lagos, and I guess Ibadan as well, that from July 1st, there was going to be an increase of about 40% in the tariff. And citing, I think, the strongest reason they gave was the fluctuating rate of the US dollar to Nigerian naira. And so that was necessitating an increase in the tariff that will be charged from the 1st of July. But only, I think yesterday evening, we heard that one of the discos, I think is the one in Abuja, has indicated that NEC has not really approved that increase. But generally, what is believed by citizens and my members is that an increase is imminent and that they have been served due notice. Most of them have not received anything to the contrary. So what we know is that we are facing a possibility of a hike in the cost of one of the most vital in our cost structure. Like I said before, it constitutes between 20 to 40% of our cost structure, depending on how power intensive your company is. So it's a major worry for us, and we are eagerly looking forward to a definitive pronouncement on this, particularly from NEC, so that we can all face our business. As it is, we have too much problems in our hands to be distracted by this rather outrageous, unwarranted, and unexpected increase in electricity tariff.
So help us understand just how big this is. I mean, if you could take us deeper, because I know that we don't have a constant electricity supply, so manufacturers have to resort to diesel, which has, I mean, largely since been deregulated. So yes, the prices are high, but the recent subsidy removal has not quite affected the price of diesel. So with this hike in electricity tariff, which, by the way, as I said, you do not get consistently, it is not like 100%. I imagine even maybe you have to resort to generators for most of it. How does that tip the balance of your costs, really?
Yes, I mean, for starters, we spent about 144 billion naira in 2022 in the supply of alternative energy in industries. And like I indicated before, when your cost structure, an item on your cost structure is between 28 to 40%, it becomes a major worry. And for us in the manufacturing sector, the highest you could have, maybe if you are connected to the national grid normally, is to have between 6 to 9 hours of electricity supply in a day. Now, electricity is like blood. Electricity to an industry is like blood to an individual. You need it in every facet of your manufacturing. So what this does to our to our competitiveness is that it makes you, when you compare yourself with products that are coming from less cost-intensive economies, you are not able to compete in terms of price. Also, you are not able to fully utilize your capacity because instead of running 3 shifts, for instance, you need to run either 1 shift. And then you also have it's not only the lack of supply, the inadequacy of the supply and the quality of supply. You are not able to plan. You are not able to predict when you are going to have power. And when you do have power, sometimes they are not able to run some of your machines. Now, for you to appreciate this matter, you have to retain the same number of staff, whether you have power or you do not have power. So you have a lot of sunk cost that continues to impact on your bottom line. There is also the issue of you even being diverted. I'm a manufacturer. I'm not engaged in power generation. So instead of me to be able to rely on the experts who are supposed to manage the supply of electricity to me, I'm bothering and engaging people to manage my power. Now, this situation becomes compounded, and like you mentioned before, when you look at the price of diesel, without expectation and within a space of 1 month, we had a jump in the price of diesel by more than 200 to 50%, which means that even the alternative that we have is become prohibitive. If you look at this scenario and you factor in the small and medium scale enterprises that are barely surviving on very low margins, this will completely take them out of business. Yeah. We've had quite a number of them now that have given indication that if we go ahead with this escalation in price, it is completely going to knock them off. Don't forget that it's coming at the same time where the exchange rate has worsened, right, and we are now even having fuel subsidy removed. These are otherwise laudable government initiatives, but when you now juxtapose it with the current imminent hike, you can see that all the alternatives that will have given succor, not only to manufacturers but to individuals, have been eroded.
Okay.
And all of this is coming without consultation. There is no way of knowing that this increase is imminent. There is no way of determining how you are going to cope with it. And you have started the year with a projection.
And it will look like...
You can do it.
Pardon me, it will look like now your head is being shaved in your absence, because as major stakeholders, you'll be expected that you'll have been a part of this whole process such that your side can be presented. We'll still talk about the Forex, which is also a major part of your business. But let's bring in Mr. Wani, because it will look like the electricity service providers are smiling to the bank now, while manufacturers are frowning at their account. So if you could speak to us, Mr. Wani, on some of the factors that are coming together. Yes, there's the main electricity service providers, the alternative service providers, which I imagine you operate in. Are you really smiling to the bank? But more importantly, what are the factors at play here? Because for a lot of people, manufacturers and consumers, they just wonder, just how much can we take, really?
Okay, thank you very much. You see, the issue of tariff adjustment, it has a regulatory framework, which has always been in place since 2008 under the regulation called the multi-year tariff order. So there are two forms of review: major review and minor review. Minor review is usually done every 6 months. And these are done to take into consideration some of the changes in the variables. The last review was done in December 2022. So the framework is there. So basically, what is taken into consideration is your cost component in terms of generation of this power, in terms of distribution of the power. So everybody in the value chain has to be able to keep these units running. In 2022, the Forex that was used to set the tariff was about 441. Today, we know that those numbers have changed. And of course, these equipments are being serviced in dollars. None of them is bought in naira. Even the gas pricing is in dollars, although paid in naira. Now, it requires more naira for you to be able to pay the same amount for your gas the generation companies use in generating their power. So the regulations has always been there. It's just to follow it through. What I expect Manufacturers Association of Nigeria to have done is, knowing that these reviews are usually done every 6 months, is to engage the regulator in advance and be able to agree on all these parameters. What are the percentage change in these parameters, so that we will know what is the right tariff adjustment? For me, it is not a tariff hike indeed, but a reflection of the market realities. So the electricity players are not making more money than they are making, because whatever money they are now addition is being making is being offset on the other end, meaning that their responsibility, their financial obligations, they have to meet it. So I believe that this is the best for the country in this circumstance.
But Mr. Wani, but Mr. Wani, that periodic review in itself, don't you think that there's a need for it to be more humane? Granted that, you know, the electricity managers themselves, you know, service providers must remain in business in the light of the circumstances. But then again, the consumers are the ones bearing the consequences, i.e. Those, you know, receiving electricity in their homes and the manufacturers. So that 6 biannually periodic review, it's stifling for those who are paying for the service. Shouldn't it be reviewed?
You see, the trust of the matter is that in as much as we want the prices to be very down, to the lowest, so that everybody could be able to afford it, but these units need to be on. It's just like telling a woman that sells tomato at Ojota, who buys a bag at 100 naira in the last 6 months, and she goes to the market, and this price has increased to 200, and you want to force her to sell at 100. What happens eventually is that she ends up not providing the service, and that service will not be available. So basically, what the NEC has tried to do in circumstance is to ensure that this service is available. Remember, we've been complaining about the fact that after the privatization, nothing much has really improved in terms of service. If we go back to the memory lane, this very multi-year tariff order was supposed to be implemented immediately after the privatization in November 2013. The government came up with what we call interim rule provisions, which provided that the CBN has to come provide some sort of backup to support the tariff deficit. Eventually, there was a change, tariff adjustment in 2015. But for some political exigencies, some classes of customers were frozen. So it now makes it impossible for the regulator to even enforce the contractual obligations that the stakeholders, the political players had. And that stunted investment into the sector. So currently, it was in 2020 that the last administration came up with the power sector recovery plan, which set up a kind of a trajectory in terms of giving assurance to investors to bring in their money and invest in this sector. Currently, the trust is coming back into the sector. Any kind of distortion in the market will kill that trust.
Mr. Wani, I'm glad you observed rightly yourself that, you know, for some time there hasn't been improvement in the service delivery in that sector, which is what a lot of consumers are talking about, that they're not getting what they're paying for. So, again, what's the justification for this tariff increase, going by the number of times that Nigerians are counting the collapse of the power grid or the power grid generating 0 megawatts for a certain period?
Okay, if we go back to 2022, when the adjustment had, the tariff payment was reset into a service-based, meaning that there are categories in terms of how much supply you receive in a day. We have band A, we have band B, we have band C, we have band D, and band E. NEC structure this tariff structure in such a manner to ensure that the consumers, if you are getting more power, like those in 20 hours is under band A. So there is a tariff structure for this class. And if you're on band A and you're unable to get power for 20 hours successfully for 2 months, there is also a process that you can apply to NEC and say, look, we are not getting this service based on the number of hours that the service operator committed that they will be providing to us. So NEC is going to trigger a process that will revert you to the exact band based on the number of hours you are receiving. So basically what NEC has tried to do is to make sure that the consumers who are receiving more number of hours are able to pay more based on service.
Right.
So it helps in terms of ensuring that customers enjoy more power and pay more.
Right. So, I mean, we're due for a break, gentlemen. Mr. Ajayi Kadir earlier was given the average time that they get power between 6 and 9 hours. So clearly I don't think there's any enjoyment in that one. But we'll come back to some of the issues raised. It looks like you're saying, Mr. Wani, that NERC has not given that approval. So the tariffs will stay as they are come July. But these are questions that will be taken up. My colleagues in Abuja as well have for you in a moment. So please stay with us.
Discover Lipton's flavorful and balanced taste. We pick fine quality tea leaves from selected tea gardens around the world to give you Lipton Yellow Label's flavorful and balanced taste in every sip.
The Duchess International Hospital opened its doors in October 2021. The mission of the hospital is to reverse medical tourism. We take particular care here at the Duchess to bring together a combination of the brightest and the best locally, as well as Nigerians in the diaspora who are interested in returning to do very good work for the benefit of our patients here in this country.
The good thing is that we have all international expertise here, all international facilities here, international people working here. Everything is coming together in a space which was considered not great in terms of the availability of healthcare.
Axis Bank, of course, has been able to provide us with a robust range of products and services that has enabled us to deliver that standard and quality of healthcare that is integral to our mission as an organization.
When you have cavities, it hurts so bad it makes you miss school. Even football.
But we prevent cavities before they form with Colgate. Colgate locks calcium in.
Keeps cavities out.
Yes, sir. Everything is available.
For quality iron rods, Swing Spider.
For original binding wire, Swing Spider.
For original nails, Swing Spider.
Swing Spider is the distributor of Dangote cement and we deliver for free.
Thank you very much. The satisfaction of our customers is of utmost importance to us.
Swing Spider, quality and integrity. All the time.
You're welcome back. We're still talking that all-important matter, electricity supply. And it looks like as it stands right now, and judging from that statement from the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, the tariff hike has been suspended or has not been approved. But we have two gentlemen who have been speaking with us. By the way, we reached out to NERC, that's the Electricity Regulatory Commission, to tell Nigerians what exactly is going on. But clearly, they're yet to respond. But as soon as they do, we'll have them on this show to speak to Nigerians on this. But let's head over to our Abuja studios now for more questions. Guys.
Thank you, Kayode. Let me start with Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadir, who's the Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Mr. Kadir, I'm sure you've heard the explanation of Mr. Chuks Wani talking about how, the facilities that even produce electricity are serviced in dollars. Some of the components that go into it are also done in dollars. And we all know what has happened with the float of the Naira. For you now, understanding also that they too are a business and they need to survive, how would you suggest that government comes in? Because at the end of the day, all of this will boil down to government. First and foremost, do you think that there are any market solutions to balancing this eventually? Or do you think that we actually need another intervention by government?
Thank you very much, because you asked whether I had him. And it's a good thing to know that he is also aware that they are not the only one in business. We are also in business to make profit. But if you permit me, I would like to borrow from what he said. He gave the example of a woman selling tomato. And you don't expect her to sell at a lower price or a constant price when the supply is high. But we are talking of a woman here that is selling a bad tomato. And so you wouldn't expect the buyer, to be enthusiastic about paying more. The indication between 2021 and 2022, the revenue of the discos increased by 20%. Around the same time, their supply dropped by 12%. These are the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics figures. The number of metered consumers is far lower than those that are estimated. So, and this is a familiar excuse they have always given. It has not been met by commensurate improvement in power. So I think we shouldn't believe them. It is only when you are able to get value for money that an increase in price is justified. We are all businessmen. We cannot pass on this cost. And which cost are you reflecting? I mean, it is cost of inefficiency, ineffective supply, and lack of supply. I've just told you that I'm paying, and many of our members are estimated, are billed in an estimated manner. And you have not controverted the fact that we have supply between 6 to 9 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours. And many of them, and so we are paying for services not rendered. You cannot allude to fluctuation in value of the currency because it's facing everybody. But I mean, what we do expect is that I will even borrow again from him that because of political exigency at some point, they had to drop the increase. That political exigency exists now and is being further made necessary by the environment that surrounds this increase. We've just had the attempted unification of the exchange rate. We've just had the removal of subsidy. We are yet to have an increase in salary of workers. The world is still suffering the effect of Russia-Ukraine war. And there are so many other factors that have continued to limit the performance of business. So apart from political exigency, there's an economic exigency here. An administration has just come in less than 1 month. You don't greet the citizens with this kind of increase. So what we expect, as a matter of fact, is that this increase, well, now it's good to hear that NEC is saying approval has not been given. NEC should simply not give that approval. What I think the narrative...
Mr. Kadiri, you know, some people will say that there are different players and this is not me in any case, in any way, you know, asking or making a case for, the, you know, electricity tariff increment. I'm just trying to lay out the facts as they are. We know that there are different players playing in different sectors of the power supply chain, those in the generation, those in transmission, and those in distribution. And oftentimes, customers deal more with those in distribution. They tend to vent their frustrations more with those in distribution. Now, I'm not very sure or very certain where Mr. Wani plays, but my guess is that he might be playing, because I'm looking at where Kensington Energy Limited falls on that. And from what I'm saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm saying is that you might be playing in the generation aspect of things. Do you think that we should have this one-size-fits-all approach, given that some other areas, some people in the generation sector, we've been talking about how generation has been doing its work as effectively as it can, but oftentimes the weakling comes in transmission and also comes in distribution, but the people in generation need to be paid. We've seen federal government intervention several times in that area, and them saying, look, we can do this no longer. Discos will have to do their jobs. Do you really think that we need to take this one-size-fits-all approach?
Okay, you know, for me, as a manufacturer, the person who is going to buy my product on the shelf does not give a damn how my factory looks. He sees the final product, it will be effective, it is safe, it will satisfy his or her taste, and he or she buys. So the discos should deal with the problems that they have, just like I'm dealing with mine. If there's problem in generation, there's problem in transmission, then the person who is distributing should deal with it. That's how I deal with my problem. And I'm a businessman. I must have done my business projections, calculations, and modules. So they should maintain their lane, we maintain our lane. I mean, you should deal with your issues. You don't bring it to me as a basic. What am I going to do about it?
So let me ask you then. Let me ask you, because from what we saw from that memo passed around by AEDC, and I don't know if there have been other distribution companies who have also made such a memo. Can you tell us under what band a lot of your manufacturers are supposed to fall under? Because we know that different price bands were proposed for different, different tariff bands were proposed for different consumers, different bands of consumers. What band would you say that your own people fall under, and are they usually given as much? Well, we know that people that get between 18 and 24 hours are supposed to pay a certain price. Those that get between 12 and 18 hours a day should pay another price, and those underneath those bands, are supposed to get another price. Where would you say your most of your clients, or let's say most of your members, fall? And, do they usually get as much supply as they're supposed to be getting?
Okay, you see, in MAN, we normally conduct survey to gauge the average supply of electricity. By the way, we are 3D customers. I hope that is what is called, and we are the heavy users. I'm sure he will correct me if I'm wrong, but we are the heaviest, if I may use the word, users of electricity. I mean, some of our member companies cannot even use generators. Those that are in steel, they are heavy users. And I'm sure you could correct me also if I'm wrong, more than 60% of their revenue is collected from those manufacturing industries. So we are heavy users, and we are in the categories of people who should normally enjoy power for a longer period. But the report I'm getting from my survey is that we are not. And that's why we are screaming. Look, if we get adequate supply, we will always rationalize it, saying that it is always better to get, to pay higher prices for electricity supply from the national grid, from the discos, than to buy diesel and resort to all forms of self-generation of power, if we are getting adequate supply. But what I'm saying is that we are not getting. If I'm supposed to get 20 hours supply and I'm getting only 10 and 11, and I'm paying for it, it's not sustainable. I mean, we are not power generators, and we have to pass this cost to consumers. At the end of the day, imported products are beating me in the marketplace, in the domestic markets. So, I mean, these are serious considerations for competitiveness. And it's no longer possible for you to just pass on this cost, because the average customer is having purchase apathy. The disposable income is low. It's spending more on so many other needs that it has. If they prioritize amount of business.
So let me ask Mr. Wani then. I mean, listening to all that you have said in terms of what you get as a... Well, I don't know if Mr. Wani can hear me. Mr. Wani, I'm sure you have listened very extensively to Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadiri and his concerns about an increase in tariff and what that would mean for many manufacturers of Nigeria, of Nigeria. Can you tell us, what conversations are currently happening within your own sector? First, to ensure that there is some level of customer satisfaction, because it would seem that underneath the complaints that they have, the chief complaint is that so far, banned or no banned, the amount of electricity they're supposed to get, for a number of hours has still not been satisfied.
Thank you, Morokwe. I share the sentiments. I share the pains of the man as the engine room that keeps the economy running. I agree with him. They are the MD customers which actually pay. They are the major consumers of electricity, and they are actually prioritized in terms of availability. I'm aware that most of the MDs are actually on the tier 1, which is the band A, and they're expected to get at least 20 hours of supply. Most of them, especially the steel company, like he mentioned, are actually directly connected to 132 kV, which is TCN, directly from the TCN, that even assured much more reliability up to, it could go on for months without turning off, except the total grid collapse. The few other ones that are on 33 kVA feeders, I'm aware, gets at least 18 hours supply. So basically, at this time, this adjustment really has to happen. The reason being that we are now getting some form of support, some form of interest in investing in the power sector, because for the past 24 months, there has been a consistent implementation of this MITO review, which has now brought back the policy trust deficit, the policy trust that have been in the sector. I listened to Peter Esedo during your last interview. He mentioned about that investors they don't trust the government. There is that deficit there. And that's what has happened between 2015 and 2020, when NEC has not been able to implement some of these regulations. Most of the capital that were available to invest, to upgrade this network, to provide meters, to provide more power, to invest on the transmission network, all of them were just waiting to know whether government is going to play by its own rules. Recently, with the passing of the Electric Power Sector Reform Act as amended, that interestism is back. Money is now trying to flow back into the sector. So if you stop it, that money will take a back step and now start waiting. So whatever gain we have made in the last 2 years, we will lose up to the last 10 years. So my take in the instance is that government could be able to find another mechanisms in order to support man, to make them competitive in the market, but not stopping a regulation, implementation of a regulation that has been consistent, that is now bringing back investment momentum into the sector. Of course, he complained about the lack of power supply. It's a process. It's not an one-day thing. It's a process that required consistent investment on the entire value chain, from the gas to the generation to the distribution down to the meter suppliers. You see, recently, the MAP had come and said, look, we can no longer supply meters. The reason being, the amount that was approved for this meter, all the variables have gone with haywire. We were expected to be getting our dollars at 4.15, 4.40 at the import-exporters window. Now it's about 7 something. It's no longer sustainable, and we can't supply these meters. Those who are providing the transformers, I say, look, the contract you gave me to provide transformers, it can no longer work. So we need to take into consideration all this and build on this momentum so that we don't lose all the gains we've made in the last 2 years. However, government can find another approach in order to support the man, to make them competitive in the market, because they have to be competitive in the market.
We have to wind down now, but essentially you're saying even meter supply, transformer supply has stopped. Is that what you're saying? Okay, Mr. Wani, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm trying to just get clarity on that point you made about meter supply and transformer supply. You're saying that it's been put on hold as a result of the forex rates.
Okay, yes, I said that, look, they have come back and said, look, the price, there is a fixed price for certain type of meters, single phase, 2-phase, 3-phase, and MD meters. So some of the variables that affect the pricing is the FX. And we know when these prices were approved for them, What was used to make those approval was about 415 naira per dollar.
I just wanted to get a sense, just to be clear, I heard you well, to know the issues we have on our hands. But because of time, we have to wind down. Let me just ask Mr. Ajayi Kadri on a final note. First, Mr. Wani said that for manufacturers, they're meant to be on Tier 1, I think Band A, expected to get at least 20 hours of electricity supply. Can you confirm that any of your members indeed get 20 hours electricity supply daily, just as we wind down now?
Well, okay, thank you. I think that if you are enjoying 20 hours supply, I won't be on this program saying what I'm saying. And I like the way he has recognized that manufacturing is critical. It is a strategic choice for every government to make. And that's why we must not be encumbered by this increase that is coming. I didn't come here to lament every other challenge that I face. I've not spoken to you about how insecurity is affecting me. I've not spoken about how multiplicity of taxes and levies are affecting me, how I cannot pick up my containers at the port, how I'm being harassed by regulatory agencies. Everybody carries his own baggage. But what we are saying is that you need to get value for money, which we are not getting. And this excuse you are giving, we've been hearing it for more than 2 decades. And the thing is that you are smiling to the bank. My members are closing shop. We lost 274 members in a period of 5 years. And these people employ labor. I mean, they are supposed to contribute to national wealth. So I believe that there has to be a conversation that takes us away from this increase, particularly at this time. There's bad timing, and it's an unjust escalation. Because you have to get value for what you produce. I cannot go to the market and tell my consumers, okay, please don't mind, this is a bad product, but please buy it because I'm suffering, I have so many challenges. Right. I think we should take the conversation away from your problem and then talking about your service delivery.
Okay. Very important point there.
Because if I'm not metered, and I've given you the fact that about 5.9 million people are not metered in Nigeria. So which means that whether they get power or not, they pay.
Okay, Mr. Ajayi Kadri, we have to anchor at that point, but clearly the conversation is far from over. It looks like the NERC has put this on hold, or at least has not given a full green light on this, judging by that statement we saw. But we'll have to thank you so much. The conversation is on. We expect to get the NERC on the show to speak to this. But Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadri, Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, thank you so much for your time, as well as Mr. Chukwuwani, NBCO, Kensington Energy Limited. Thank you, gentlemen, for giving us more insight into this particular issue.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's take your mails now. Lots of them have been coming in. I'll take this first one from Thomas Odejide, and it's on subsidy. Oh, yes. Apart or in addition to mentioning names of people who have been sucking Nigeria dry through fake subsidy, I will suggest that these people be made to vomit what they have swallowed. They can be given the chance to do so in repentance and may thus not have to suffer too much shame. Thanks, he says.
And Pastor Law Alpha Cross is also speaking in the same vein, and he says, during the oil subsidy regime, it has been discovered that it provided the conduit pipe through which many highly placed Nigerians amassed wealth for themselves with our national patrimony. Let government set up a probe panel to look into the value chain.
Well, Festus Akimboyewa says, whilst there's no doubt that oil subsidy benefits the richest few percentage of our population and it's accessible for corruption, the cost of transportation for a majority of Nigerians since the subsidy was removed is debilitating. Government must act quickly to help the poorest people in our country because the economic inequality arising from the oil subsidy removal is huge.
And finally, Kingsley Oshinowo says Nigeria is driving towards a pure market economy. The government can't completely allow the invincible hands of demand and supply to determine prices in all public goods consumption because of affordability. Electricity tariff will further increase hardship. When it comes to conversations around fuel subsidy or anything consumable in Nigeria, there is no end to it. And we'll definitely keep tabs on what's happening around there and keep you updated. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of your morning. I'm Neo Tagwe.
Thank you. make sure that you keep your head up regardless of whatever is happening around you. I'm Malkwe Yusuf. Thank you for watching.
And from this side, we say thank you very much for allowing us being a part of your morning, and enjoy the rest of your day. I am Bukola Koka.
Let me just reecho the words of the president. Let the poor breathe. Don't suffocate them. I'm Kaido Kikilo. Have a great day.
Just Nigeria cares about the things you care about.
I'm young, I'm a Muslim, I'm Hausa.
With many more perspectives.
I'm a health systems consultant,
project manager,
IT expert.
Whether visiting tech startups, education hubs, or